I think what we're going to do is Katy is going to share her screen and advance the slides. We'll go from there. We realized last time that, or I realized last time, that when I'm sharing my screen in, PowerPoint mode or presentation mode, I can't see any, all the little notes that I scribbled on another tab. So I'm like, oh, wait, my notes are gone. So this is our way around that. Cool. Looks like that's up. Great. So yeah, thanks for having us. We're always happy to talk about this kind of thing. And we're going to focus on communicating science with diverse audiences today, because Chelsea mentioned we kind of want a little bit of everything, how to talk to not only like maybe journalists or members of the media about your work, but also collaborators, funders, your boss, whoever. So I can click ahead.
Oh, why is that not working?
There we go. So maybe just probably advance this whole thing, Katy. So we'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll go over a couple key aspects to how to approach your communications. We're going to go over what it means to use direct language, and then finish up with some social media. So I'm Katy Weeman. I'm one of the Katys. I have a very basic science background from CU Boulder, enough to give me a baseline knowledge, but not near enough to make me anything of an expert in any sort of science. I also gave tours at the Celestial Seasonings factory for a bunch of years, and that sort of sparked my interest in all things communication, combined with my love of science. And then I popped a picture of my little children down there in the corner. Katy.
So I'm Katy Human, and I'm the Director of Communications at CIRES. I have a PhD in biology from way back, and got into science writing through AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, which was just totally delightful. I spent a summer at the Dallas Morning News, which at the time had a really robust weekly science section. It doesn't anymore. Oh, I was supposed to explain my ants. Those are my ants, the little nasty ones attacking the lovely big one. I studied Argentine ants, which were invading a nature preserve in Northern California. So got into doing this communications thing through this AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. And that's it. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of flying blind. So Katy, you tell me when to hit advance, okay?
Okay, I will. Advance.
Okay. There we go.
Cool. So first we're going to go over sort of the key questions you should ask yourself when entering.
Katy, can we have the folks on the call introduce themselves?
Oh, yeah. How many people? We weren't sure how big of a group it was going to be. But yeah, if it's, I don't know how many people are on, but yeah. Do we want to go around, Chelsea, or is that what?
Yeah, let's do it. I think it's small enough to do that. Cool.
And we want to try to do a little bit of like participation on some of these slides. So
cool.
We can get that going with that.
Cool. I can start. I'm Chelsea Nagy. I'm the program manager for Earth Lab. I have a PhD in ecology, and I spend about half of my time working on trying to find funding opportunities for Earth Lab, and the other half doing research.
Let's see. I don't know how we should go about what order.
Call out the name of somebody. If you've just introduced yourself, call out the name of someone who hasn't.
That works.
Pass it along. Just pass it on.
Matilda.
Hi, I'm Matilda. I'm a postdoc in the Copley lab over on the Boulder campus. As you can see, I've been back in the lab since Memorial Day, which is super getting old. I got my PhD in New Zealand in 2015. I study evolution at the molecular protein level, and I'm currently studying the evolution of microbial enzymes that break down pesticides. So I do research full time.
Cool.
Virginia.
And Matilda, you're in Shelley Copley's lab, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm a research scientist at Earth Lab, and I do research on extreme events. Well, I don't really get to choose. Who's next? Nicola.
Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm a new CIRES postdoc working in Jen K's lab. And I do climate science, all sorts of looking at future projections in climate models of temperature and precipitation mostly. I'll call on Nayani.
Oh.
Thanks. I'm a postdoc at Earth Lab. My name is Naini Ilangakon. I'm working with Professor Barge, and I'm researching fire recovery using remote sensing.
Say that one more time. I couldn't quite hear that.
Oh, my name is Nayani Ilangakon. I'm a postdoc and working with Professor Jennifer Barge. And my research is about fire recovery, and I use remote sensing.
Cool. Thanks.
I call Li Chao.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lin Kao Huang. I'm also a new postdoc in CIRES, ESOC series, and I use satellite images to observe permafrost change in the Arctic. Yeah.
Very cool.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, nice little group today. Cool. It sounds like, a lot of you will be hopefully publishing your research in the coming months or years. And so, feel free to reach out to us whenever you have publications coming out or you want to promote what you're doing through even just social media or whatever. We're here to work with you guys as CIRES postdocs. So, cool. Well, so there's gonna be kind of three areas that we're gonna, three questions we're gonna ask ourselves when we're looking to communicate a message. One being, who is your audience? What is your goal? And what's your message and how do you deliver that message? So we're gonna go through a couple examples. If you wanna go to the next slide. So to start with audience, and here's where we can start a little bit of the interactive portion to bring everyone in here. So feel free to just pop in things in the chat as we go through these different steps. So what are some audience areas that you might want to reach? So, one of them could be, like Chelsea said, funders or the media or something like that. So feel free to just pop in kind of either who you think your audience is or who you want your audience to be or even just different ideas that you have, and we'll see what people think. And then we can kind of go over what I had on my list. Stakeholders, great. Journalists. Researchers from different fields, excellent. Vendors. Public, yep. Cool. Yeah, and so I had all those, and I had, decision makers, potential collaborators, elected officials, something like the land use department, maybe students or people who you want to recruit, the media, panelists, sure. So obviously there's a lot of different areas and a lot of different audiences that we might be aiming to reach, and that's kind of, one of the first things you want to identify so that you can craft your message around that. So if we want to go to the next slide. I have a couple examples that we can go through when we're thinking about these different steps. So this first one here was from one of our CIRES fellows, Chris Karnaskis. This particular study, they looked at rising CO2 levels, particularly indoor CO2. And what they found is that, actually I'll pop in the our press release so we can all be looking at the same thing. So what they found was by the end of the century, people could be exposed to indoor CO2 levels of up to 1,400 parts per million, and that's 3 times today's outdoor levels, and well beyond what humans have ever experienced. And that actually directly reduces our ability to make decisions and think and use complex strategic thinking. So this was sort of like a different view on what climate change is, a different sort of more hidden impact. And so let me go back to my notes here. So if we're looking at, you know, a study like this, when we want to ask that first question of who is the audience? One audience, you know, we were just kind of brainstorming about this. So one could be one of the things that we had on our list, which was potential collaborators, because this particular study, there's 3 authors. There's Chris, who's the climate expert. They had Shelley Miller from CU Engineering. She looks at ventilation in buildings and how air travels around indoor spaces. And then we had Anna Shapiro, who is a brain scientist. So 3 really different fields coming together to look at this kind of new problem. And so, you know, that was sort of one audience, is different collaborators from different fields. So, you know, they wanted to spark new research and investigation on like these lesser known impacts of climate change. And that's where you sort of ask yourself the question, you know, what sparks that type of engagement? So in this case, it would be, you know, like inspiring other scientists to explore those impacts, maybe even engage with that, like the scientific controversy of a topic like this and start a conversation. Another audience potentially could be something like policymakers. You know, they might be prompted to think about what changes they want to make now, knowing that rising CO2 is going to impact not only just, you know, the more obvious things, but our ability to think. You know, it's yet another motivation to make changes on their end. And then of course the general public, you know, increasing public awareness for why people should care about climate change and this sort of thing. So those were sort of the areas of the audience that we pinpointed. And then let's see here. I have so many tabs open. I'm like, which ones should I be looking at? So let's see here. Oh, was there another slide in here? Okay, forget how many we had to advance. So, okay, so we've identified an audience, and now, you know, what do we want them to do? So when it comes to, and you know, I kind of touched on that in what I just said, but you know, when it comes to collaborators, what do we want them to do? We want to start a conversation with them. When it comes to something like policymakers, we want to make them aware of these issues so that they have more motivation for making changes. And then of course, general public, what do we want them to do? We want them to be more aware of the different hidden impacts of climate change that it could have. And then if we want to do one more, okay. So yeah, so then when we, you know, once we identify the audience and what that goal is that we want the audience to get from this, then what does the audience need to hear for us to achieve that goal? So when you're thinking about kind of crafting your message and what your message should portray, you can think about first, what is the significance? You can do one more. What's new about this work? What aspect of it is novel, meaning people, you know, will actually want to know about it, and what's different about your work compared to others in your field or in other fields. What's cool or unique about it? I can do one more, Katie. How is it relevant and what changes as a result? So the question, you know, you can ask yourself, and the question that we a lot of times ask ourselves when we're writing a press release, for example, is like, so what? Why should this matter to other people? Why should people care? And then what do you want your audience to hear based on all that? Craft your message based on what you identified, you know, what's the significance, how is it relevant? Craft what you say, whether that's, you know, what you are actually writing, whether, for example, you're writing a blog or a piece for the conversation or something like that, or you're working with someone like us to write a press release. or you're talking to a journalist that's interviewing you about a news story, you know, craft your message based on what you want them to hear. And if you have these things in your head, you can be really clear about that message. So we have a couple other examples that we'll kind of rope you guys in on to see if you can identify, you know, some of these key components. So this one was just the first example that we had with the Chris Karnauskas study. And so here, remember, our audience could be other scientists, policymakers, or the public. The goals were sparking collaboration, inspiring policymakers, and bringing general awareness. So now let's look at a different example. I want to change the next one. So for this one, so this study, and I have too many tabs open. So this was a study led by NCAR, and one of our CIRES fellows, Steve Neeram, was looking at sea level rise and how rates of sea level rise are very different depending on the coastline and the location in the world. So some coastlines are rising at much higher rates than others, and you know, what does that mean for how people should prepare for that in the future? So if we're thinking about those kind of key components that we've looked at for some of the other ones, let's start with audience. So if you guys want to pop in some of your ideas that you might think, like, who would be the audience for this type of study? People living on the coast, yep. People who live on land, yep. Let's see what I have on my list. So I had, yep, anyone, you know, living on the coast, yep, policymakers. I had land developers or national security, public. Great. And then when we think about our next step here, what are the goals? So when we're thinking about policymakers, land developers, people living on the coast, what do we want them to get out of something like this? Let's start, I guess, with policymakers. What did I have on my list? Sense of urgency, information to help make decisions. Yep, exactly. So maybe better prepare for, you know, hazards like flooding. What about something like land developers? I think go to talk to Republicans, perfect. So I had, let's see, inform land developers so they can make better decisions about where and what to build to keep people safe. And then the public. So let's see, I had, you know, people who live near coastlines and vulnerable areas should know about these dangers. So, you know, you're kind of looking at it from all these different angles. And then we can go to the next one, Katie.
Okay, I was just going to add for the public, I just think there's also just the wow factor in this one. Like, it's bizarre. Like, we all, if you're not an expert, this is probably basic to all you postdocs, but you know, I think we tend to think of the oceans rising all perfectly in tandem everywhere and the impact being the same, and there's a kind of gee whiz part for the general public.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. And then there's a lot of different programs all over CIRES that help with education, scientific literacy, that kind of thing. A lot of, you know, education outreach in that group, but I chose an example that was Earth Labby. So this was a story that we did for the Earth Lab folks on the new Earth Data Science Core program. And so, you know, this really could be for a program like this or anyone. But in this particular one, you know, we're focusing on underrepresented communities and kind of bringing the field of big data and STEM in general into these underrepresented communities. And so for this, what do you think could be some potential audiences for this type of program? Funders. I also had potential participants. And there could be others, well, yeah, future students in the program. And then in terms of goals, I guess we can start with funders. What would the goal be? What would we want funders to know about this and urge them to take action? Yep, more funding, that's what we want from them. So I put like bringing awareness, bringing attention to the value and the education and importance for diversity in STEM and scientific literacy in general, to inspire more funding. Yes, keep funding it, proving that not only fund it at the beginning, but continue to. What else do I have in here? Just generally inspiring others, creating a more scientifically literate population, not only for these communities, but for all. So, yeah, those are my two main examples after that CIRES study. And let's see, is there anything else on this slide, Katie? Nope. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know, not sure how much time we should, because I really only have, let's see, yeah, the direct language thing and social media after this. So I guess up to you guys if we want to think about some of the things that you are studying and what your message is and audiences could be. So I don't know if someone wants to be brave, and we can maybe go off of one of your examples.
Katy,
Mhm.
let's do a direct challenge. Let's give people 4 minutes and let's time it.
Okay.
So the direct challenge is this. Think of either something you've published recently, maybe it's a chapter of your PhD thesis, or something you've read recently that a colleague has published. And go ahead and Google it if you need to remind yourself about it. And think of, what you're going to be doing, of course, is looking at the title and the abstract and reminding yourself of what exactly you did or your colleague did. Think about a non-scientific audience you might be motivated to have learn about this work. And then, so let's identify, if everybody can do this, identify an audience, identify a goal you have for communicating to that audience, and then craft a message and go. You have 4 minutes and we're going to put you on the spot. When you come back, we'll have time to go through 2 of these, I think.
The pressure's on. So we'll I guess convene again at 11:30. Well, that's only 4 minutes for now. I won't make too much noise.
Chelsea, shouldn't you be working too? Aren't you going to say?
I'm working.
Awesome. You just look very calm.
I'll do one more minute. All right. That wasn't much time, but did that feel like enough to jot a couple things down? For those of you that did? Cool. Does anyone want to volunteer to share? Let's see. Maybe I'll have Chelsea call in someone because she knows you guys a little better.
Oh, that's mean. Anybody want to volunteer? I will call on someone.
There's no pressure, and like whatever you had, like this is just sort of a discussion.
I can volunteer.
Thank
If you
you.
want. Sure.
We commend you.
Okay, you just want the answer to those 3 questions, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, so my audience would be the general public. The goal would be for the general public to have kind of understanding of what we observe. And the message is that local temperature trends that you observe are dominated by chaotic variability. So just because you observe cooling in the next 10 to 15 years where you live doesn't mean that the world isn't warming.
Cool. And so what do we think maybe are the barriers? Because sounds like this goal is coming out of like, you know, a lot of people in general public not fully understanding that that's, you know, that there's always variation in temperature trends and climate trends, and kind of maybe clearing up the misconception that, you know, it's about the long term trends and not about what's happening year to year, or, you know, and some people like month to month, like, oh well, last month was cold, so clearly there's not overall warming. Yeah, any thoughts, Katie?
I think it's great, and I think it's savvy.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to pretend I know nothing about your field, and I would say I know nothing about what that phrase means. Dominated by chaotic variability. That sounds like you're trying to make me feel dumb, and I'm going to get all defensive and say, who are you to tell me what I'm observing is not real? Just to play devil's advocate here, how could you revise that?
See, I'm trying to think too.
Maybe say something like vary year to year or something.
Yay!
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or very on short time scales or something like that.
That would work.
Now I might get a little confused about that word.
What's short and very on maybe a year to year time scale.
What about vary? You know, I don't really know what that means and why that's important.
Or maybe you start with what is the main message, which is we see overall warming trends over X period of time, and we see that in the data.
I think this is it. I think you did it with your second sentence, and I think this often happens, that sometimes scientists want to start with kind of the embedded more detailed stuff
Mm.
and I forget to give the broad statement up top. Just because it's cooling where you live doesn't mean the world isn't warming. Now, let me use that to engage you about why your temperature trends locally might go up and down a little bit. And so again, I would, depending on your audience, and some in the general public now understand variability. You might just say, go up and down, or you might refer to the natural swings of weather versus as opposed to climate. But I think you really nailed it with this sentence. I think that's great. And here is when I first started at NOAA, like I've been at CIRES and then I went to NOAA for a couple of years and came back. And in the middle, NOAA had hired this really prestigious advertising firm. They never were able to use the advertisements that the firm created because they couldn't come up with the money for it. But the products were stunning. And one of the advertisements was this tall image of this woman all bundled up in a jacket. And it said, if the climate is warming, why is it so cold? And then the tagline was no one knows. And so that you've really nailed a version of that. Fun. Cool. Thanks for putting yourself out there, Nicola.
No worries. Thanks for making it better.
Well, we want to try for one more? Someone else is feeling brave? Or
Yeah.
I mean, that was also a great example, and that, so we don't have to, but if someone else is feeling like they want to share. I don't want to call on someone that doesn't feel prepared, but
I want to give it a go, but my work's all really esoteric and not applied at all. But I think I would also want to address the general public.
Great.
And I think my message would be more along the lines of fundamental research is cool and important. Because I get so much of people being like, but why? But what is it for? What cancer are you curing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, as human beings, the pursuit of knowledge for knowledge's sake is really noble by itself, she says, as the glaciers melt around her. So some of the stuff that I've studied is about evolution and how the building blocks of life might have functioned right, like way before the great grandfather that we share with bacteria. So I guess the message from one of my publications is that I don't know if it's too complicated to talk about proteins, but primordial proteins could be compatible with life. So I don't know if that's too jargony.
Say it one more time again.
Primordial proteins could be compatible with life. So if you think of the amino acids that make up proteins as like an alphabet, which means that we have 20 letters that we can use to make words, what if we only had an alphabet of 5 letters or 9 letters? And I did some work making little proteins using only that smaller shrunken alphabet, and found that those proteins can do simple things that are essential to life.
Cool. Yeah, and so I think, like what you were saying about like the pursuit of knowledge for the knowledge itself, like that could go, like if we go to our, how did I word it? When you're crafting your message, what's the significance? When you think about what's novel or what's different or cool, like, sometimes it is because, it matters to people and it accomplishes a goal. But, one of the big things on our list is like, is it novel? Is it something that no one else has reported on before? Is it something that's unique in your field, or, you know, among similar fields, or beyond? And so, you know, you can, like, maybe that is a focus of something like this, that, you know, we didn't know this before, and now we know it, and the potential of that, because, you know, it's knowledge for knowledge's sake, but at the same time, it's becoming a building block that now that you know that, other people, it can spark research more for you. It can spark research for your collaborators, for other people in similar and related fields. And then maybe because you made this finding, you know, a few years down the road, someone's going to build upon that and make yet another finding, and it's going to continue.
So one of the impacts of this is that the search for life outside Earth isn't looking for big gray aliens. It's looking for trace elements that we associate with life. So if someone looks at an asteroid and they find some amino acids, but they don't find all of the ones we use on Earth, then maybe they find the same alphabet that I've shown could generate useful proteins. So we got a bit of NASA funding for that kind of stuff.
Nice, cool. Yeah, I really like that, because now what you're doing is you're bringing this, obviously not simple, but simpler, you know, concept of, hey, this alphabet is something that can make words. And now you're bridging it out to, and what does that mean? That means that we can use this finding to explain how life might be written, you know, in other settings. So yeah, that's really cool. What do you think, Katy?
I think that's extraordinary, and I love bringing it out to that level. Katy and I tend to always be looking for these messages that hammer home practicality, right? Because in some ways that's a lot of what CIRES does. This sort of environmental science focus that is the ES in CIRES always deals with problems that the world at large, or at least segments of society, face. And so we're always looking for solutions. But I love stories like this. As somebody who just sort of grew up loving science, and I know Katy's the same way, and many people in the general public are, we want to be wowed. We want to hear, and you know, it's that wow factor that motivates us to learn more, right? That's critical for teaching as well. But to hear, hey, it might be easier than we think to build these sort of essential first steps toward life, that's pretty neat. So yeah, rah.
I think so too.
Cool. All
right. Well, thank you both for sharing. And I know it's hard to share stuff on the spot.
Wait, we had a question.
What?
I was saying that I have a question, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So it's about methods. When to talk about your methods. And let me be like super quick here. So let's say I wanna create awareness and call for action. So I'm talking to the general public or stakeholders. And I wanna tell you that in the 2000s, wildfires became more extreme, not only in the Western US, but also in the East. Let's say that. Now, I think it's pretty cool how I know that. And of course, I'm not saying that I'm gonna tell anybody that I looked at the cross wavelength spectrum of the pre-Whiteman time series. We're not going there. How about saying that we looked at over 30,000 fires? Or that we got that information from satellites or stuff like that? Is that a big no? Or does it reinforce the thing? Let's say, oh, you know your stuff. Like we looked at over 20,000 fires, 30,000, sorry. So how, yes or no to methods?
Yeah, something like that, I think definitely has a spot in your message. So, and that's a hard part when it comes to any research, you know, is that in terms of the science of it, your methods are so important, you know, and it's hard to make that, to push your message first and then have your methods come second, because like Katie mentioned before, like, you know, as a scientist, you're sort of geared to do it the other way. You're sort of geared to really think critically, and then you do all this work, you do all these calculations, and then you come up with your final result, you know. And so, but when you're pushing a media message, it's really the opposite. You know, you're hitting that really simple and clear message for the public, and then you can maybe go into more detail. But when it's something like, you know, we looked at 30,000 fires, that's, you know, making your argument more valid, because, you know, that just means that you had a better, you know, better study. You were getting, you know, your information from this great data set. So yeah, I feel like that would be something that I might include in like the subhead of a press release or something, like, you know, CU Boulder analyzed, well, maybe not the subhead, but maybe the second paragraph, you know, so you know, you want to maybe say your message first, and then, you know, we looked at 30,000 fires to figure out X, Y, Z. But yeah, go ahead, Katie.
Well, I was going to say, you know, when I think, let's talk about just this specific type of communication, a press release. You know, the first goal is to capture the results, right? You know, the overarching message. But the other, you know, if you think about other audiences, other potential scientists and collaborators who are going to find this interesting, referencing the methods, like we got this information from satellite data, or even a specific satellite, or by combining info from a few satellites, or studying X number of fires, that gives a quick little hint to scientists, people who are really in the know, oh, I need to look deeper, right? And they might click into the paper. So it broadens the audience to include a little bit of methods like that. So we almost always do include that in our press releases. As Katie said, you know, I'm thinking, you know, the third or fourth or second, whatever paragraph might be, you know, the researchers made this conclusion after 4 years in the field in the Uinta Basin in Utah, taking measurements on the ground, by satellite, and by aircraft. Or, you know, so it's a simplified view of your methods, but it's helpful to some potential colleagues and collaborators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of, you know, it's about making tiers of, you know, how critical is it to say things first, second, third. And Katie's the expert in this, but the, you know, in terms of like how newspapers used to function, they used to physically cut the bottom of the news story up and up if they needed to shorten it. And so if something is at the bottom of your story, you know, that if that goes, the story should still make sense all the way up until the very first paragraph. So you should be able to share a 2-sentence thing, you know, that really captures the meatiest part, the most interesting, important, critical part of your science. And then maybe the second paragraph is, you know, expands just a little bit more on that, but still makes sense without the third paragraph, without the fourth. So kind of tiering and categorizing how critical each of these components is kind of helps you craft, like, what do people want to know first, second, third? So cool. Great question. All right. So direct language versus indirect language. So as we've learned over the years, scientists love indirect language, and it's sort of, you're almost trained to write that way in publications, where you're saying, for example here, mistakes were made. So the instead of let's see, what is the order here? I'm losing all my notes. So noun first, so you do verb and then the noun, but really you should be swapping it. So for this first example, instead of mistakes were made, can advance it, Katie.
Well, let's see what people would say.
Oh yeah, well, I didn't know if I should give one example first. Okay, well, if you were talking about yourself.
I made mistakes.
Yeah, I made mistakes, exactly. So it's just so much more clear, it's so much more direct. The way that the mind follows that is just so much more concise. And so I think we have a couple other examples on here. So what about the second one? Arlene was promoted by her boss. How did you make that direct?
The boss promoted Arlene.
Yep. And then the house will be leased by Juan.
Juan will lease the house.
Exactly. Yep. So basically, you want to kind of reverse that. The thing that you've probably been told throughout your education is to, write in that more indirect way, and swapping it and doing noun then verb instead of the other way around. You kind of like your brain just thinks a little less when you're like reading this, and if someone in the public was reading this, for example, and it brings you closer to the actual message, it brings you closer to the work, and yeah, it's just a lot more concise. So try to do that whenever you can. In advance. And then another thing in terms of what you're trained as a scientist is in terms of jargon and what that means to you versus what that means to a lay audience. So we can do another little guessing game for some of these. So in terms of the scientific, the jargon term, the scientific term, enhance, that means something different in a research study than it does to the general public. So a lot of times people will see enhance and they'll think improve, when really you're talking about something else. So feel free to pop in your, like, what would be a better way to describe an enhancement, so if we're talking about your data, an enhancement. Increase, yep.
Oops.
Exactly. So, and that may be so intuitive to someone who studies that, like, oh, of course, an enhancement means an increase, in that data that I saw. But when the public sees that, they think, oh, they improved the data. So, so here's another example, aerosol. So when we're talking about, those things in the air that you're studying, a lot of times people just think that means something coming out of a spray can, when obviously that means a whole slew of other things. So what's another thing? Yeah, droplet, sure. Other guesses? We can go through these kind of quickly, I guess. We want to advance that next one, Katie. Yeah, tiny atmospheric particle, so you want to be really blunt, when you're describing, like, think about if you had no scientific knowledge, what would you assume? Uncertainty is another big one. So it's intuitive to you that uncertainty just means, the range of uncertainty. It doesn't mean that you are ignorant as to what you're looking at. It just means a range. What about error? What's a better word that we could use instead of, if you're talking about your margin of error, to make people realize that you're not talking about a mistake? Variability, sure. Okay, what did we have there? Confidence. Yeah, difference from true number. Just, a way to describe something that, people aren't going to interpret that the wrong way. Oh yeah, positive feedback. This is, when we're talking about a climate feedback, a positive feedback. A lot of times people don't understand what that scientific concept means, and they think that means, oh yeah, like, I gave my kid positive feedback the other day. I gave him a lollipop when they, but what's a better way we can describe what that means? Vicious cycle, yeah. Oh, that was good job. I don't know if you saw that or not, but yeah, self-reinforcing, sure. Values, when talking about a value in your data, what's a different word we could use? Numbers, data points, yep. I think we probably, yep, quantity. Scheme. It doesn't mean devious plot, it means what? Wait, enter it. What did we have there? Systematic plan. So, and of course, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of instances that you may come across with this, but just sort of, maybe like talk to a family member or friend that's not in a scientific field and be like, what do you think this word means? When you see this word, what's the first thing you think of? Okay, cool. All right, so now we can kind of dive into the next portion, which is social media. So I don't know who uses social media often or who doesn't. So it might be a little repetitive for people that are already social media users. But why should we use social media? Well, it can boost your citations, it can boost your altmetric citations, because you're expanding your audience to include people that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before, because everyone's online. You can use it to explain value to funders, which are a lot of times taxpayers, just the general public. It's fun, it's rewarding, it gives you another outlet to describe your work and push your work out there. Spark collaboration and conversation. Social media, if nothing else, is just a big conversation. And of course, inspire others in advance. Why not? A lot of times, depending on how much of an audience you have, you're sort of preaching to the choir. It can be a little bit of an echo chamber. If, you know, people who, let's say, follow you on Twitter or something are only people that you work with anyway, you know, are you really pushing that out as much as you could? Of course, it can be risky. I think we've all seen people behaving certain ways on Twitter, especially in the last few years. So, you know, obviously you want to be careful with how you portray yourself online and on social media. You want to be fun and playful, but you want to, you know, still maintain, you know, a sense of professionalism. And it does take a lot of time. I think a lot more time than people initially realize. It can really suck a lot of your hours if you want to actually be doing it in a way that really portrays your message to a greater audience. Again, next slide. So when we're thinking about like the big picture, like what do you want to portray when you're on social media? So we say you want to foster the identity that you want to present to the world. Think about, you know, the things that we have talked about so far. Think about your audience and your goals and your message. How can you portray those things online? Ask yourself, are you okay with that content living online forever? And then this last one is really important too. So social media engagement, and we could also add on to that, you know, press release engagement, news engagement, anything in that realm. That does not always equate to science value. So just like we were talking about the methods and how, you know, those are just so critically important to you, to your field, to your collaborators, to that field of science. Just because something doesn't fly in the media and really take off, that doesn't mean, of course, that it has, that doesn't really equate to the science value all the time. So think about what you want to put online and think about, will the general public find this interesting? Or will other scientists find this interesting? And you can gauge who you share it with, who you tag up, for example, based on that. Go next slide. So there's a bunch of different social media platforms. We mainly just use Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but there's a whole slew of things out there that I know less about. For example, I don't know anything about ResearchGate because I'm not a researcher, and I know very little about Reddit too, but we use Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, so I'm going to go over those. We want to go to the next one. So Twitter, we have, for us anyway at CIRES, we have our biggest audience on Twitter. We have almost 6,000. Katie, I've been watching it. We're at 5. This is a screenshot I took this morning. 5979. We're almost to 6,000. Like waiting for it to go over. But anyway, Twitter, it's really fast-paced, and it's short and it's snappy. You have a character limit. Right now it's 280 characters per tweet. But you can, you know, include an image, and you can actually tag people in the image too. You kind of want to save your, I call it real estate, your text real estate. You know, you don't want to be using your entire 280 characters just to tag people up, so you can tag people in an image. We can actually show you that if you want. But you want to be, you know, snappy, use abbreviations. That's totally fine to do on Twitter. You want to utilize hashtags. So a hashtag basically is, it leads you to a whole different category that's based on that topic. So if you put a hashtag in front of, let's say, climate change, and someone can then, if someone is searching for climate change, that means that your tweet is then going to show up in their search. And so it's a way to connect to different specific topics. Look out for the trends. You can always see on the side of Twitter what's trending. You can, search it on your own too to figure out how to engage with that. It's really quick conversation. You can also use bit.ly.com to shorten your links. I don't know if anyone uses that, but bit.ly.com is a really great tool that you can basically reduce any URL to like 10 characters or something like that. So we use that a lot. Go to the next one. So Facebook does not have a character limit like Twitter does. So it's going to be longer blurbs, use full sentences, use proper punctuation on that. So it tends to have a deeper, slower engagement, can be more intimate, more personal. Things kind of last longer on Facebook. Like if you post on Facebook several days later, you might still be trickling in some engagement. But Twitter, my fun fact for Twitter is that the average lifespan of a tweet is 7 minutes. And so if no one engages with it, likes it, shares it, whatever, in the first 7 minutes, it basically disappears. So if you are using Twitter, a lot of times you want to try to post more frequently, and you really want to tag up other institutes, other collaborators, media, whoever you think is appropriate to tag. Use those hashtags, because every time you do that, it pings other people. It makes that tweet go into another feed that people can see, or it encourages someone else to share it. And then every time you do that, you get another 7 minutes and another and another. And then that's how it keeps going. So what do we have next? I think we have Instagram next.
Katy, I think we are at time.
We are.
Yeah, this has flown. But so jump off if you need to, but I think Katy's really only got about 4 more minutes of content here left.
Yeah, and I probably have to go in about 4 minutes anyway.
Cool.
And so feel free to email me if you have any questions about any of this. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about if anyone has questions. So Instagram is all about the photos. It also uses a lot of hashtags, but you can't click on links in Instagram. So it's truly about highlighting the image itself. It's good for kind of, photos of your behind the scenes work, and kind of a way to dive into, kind of a background of, a lot of times people will, especially now, put pictures of, okay, well, here's my cat on my keyboard as I'm analyzing this data set. I've seen a lot of those recently, but it's all about the images. We can go to the next one. So what do you want to do? This might not be for everyone in Earth Lab, but because I know a lot of times we have fields that people are in the field a lot, and then we have fields where people are at their computer a lot, and a lot of times, obviously, big data analysis is a lot of that computer work. But think about how to bring people into your world in that way. Really utilize images, especially with Twitter. Do it often, because it'll die after those 7 minutes. Share other people's posts, applaud other people's successes. Make sure to follow and engage with a lot of other people, because again, it's really just a big conversation. Tagging up others is really the key, because if you don't tag up anyone, especially at the beginning, if you don't have a big following, probably no one's going to see it. You can go to the next one. And then don't engage with negative people. Online, there's always going to be people who interact inappropriately with your material. Feel free to just not engage with that. Be careful about mixing personal and professional. Don't post pictures of people without their permission. Make sure to double check before you send it out there on your spelling or whatever. Try not to post really wordy, complicated posts, or post too often. It's great to use hashtags, but don't use all of the hashtags for everything. So when you think about hashtags, it has to be specific enough that it makes sense as like a topical category. So you can say, let's see, climate change is a hashtag, but hashtag change maybe isn't. So you want to do hashtag climate, hashtag change, or something like that, because that wouldn't mean much.
Hey, Katy, can I tell our spelling error story?
Sure.
So, at a conference, we wanted to encourage people on Twitter at AGU to go down and check out the National Snow and Ice Data Center booth, right? They have a booth every year and you can go check out, their data and talk to professionals there. But with one single spelling change, booth, the NSIDC booth becomes not B-O-O-T-H, but B-O-O-T-Y. And checking out NSIDC's booty is very different from checking out booth. So be careful.
Not to say that that was a real thing that someone did, but in a theoretical world, maybe someone was running around at AGU and hadn't eaten in a few hours and did that. So just proceed with caution. And then you can pop all these on there, Katie.
Okay.
These are just a couple examples, recent examples that I found. So Chris Karnaskis is actually a great social media influencer. We tag him up all the time and he's great about sharing his own work. So this was the post that he used for that study that we talked about first, about the cognition. So the great things he did here was, you know, he made it really interesting. A climate scientist, a mechanical engineer, and a cognitive neuroscientist walk into a bar. Really snappy, engaging. The other things he did right is he tagged up those people. So those people are going to get a ping and they're going to share his tweet. He used the hashtag for the AGU conference. This year it's AGU 20, last year is AGU 19. He used an image here that's a little puzzling but engaging. So, you know, a lot of things he did right there. On the other side, I put my post and I tagged up a ton of other collaborators. I tagged up even more in the image and kind of used our opener for our press release as that engaging first kind of lead. Here's one from the Sea of Boulder News Twitter. So they used hashtag Earth Day, you know, engage with things like Earth Day or like, I don't know, National STEM Education Week. You know, there's all sorts of different trending things like that that you can hook into. They used a Bitlified link there, I see, so they didn't use their entire 280 characters on the URL. And then here's another one from NSIDC. So they did hashtag Arctic. They tagged up a bunch of other institutes. They have a link there to this this news article. So just kind of some of the good things that people do kind of illustrated here. But any thoughts or questions on anything social media related? Cool. And yeah, again, I kind of rushed through that last part because I didn't realize it was noon. But you can email us. We are, here I'll pop in, what is it, Colorado. This is the email that'll go to our comms team. So that'll ping Katy, myself, our other writer, and our graphic designer, and you know, we'll field it to the right person. Yes, we can. Let's pop in both of ours, Katy.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate that we're available to you guys. So as CIRES postdocs, use us. If you are going to be presenting to a group that's not just your typical science conference and you want someone to take an eye at your presentation for jargon, or if you have a publication coming out and you feel like it might be of interest to a broader general public set of journalists, let us know. Chelsea is also at Earth Lab, of course, the person to go through to start, and run it by Chelsea before maybe. But we'd love to hear from you. It's a little embarrassing to say that earlier career scientists tend to be much, much better natural communicators. So we love working with postdocs. So bring it on.
And they're always so excited about their work. And, you know, a lot of times I mean, I love all of our fellows, don't get me wrong, but, you know, a lot of them, like, they think they're so experienced. Well, they are, you know, but, you know, we just really love the chance to work with early career scientists because you guys are so enthusiastic about your science, which we love. So cool. Well, reach out with any questions, or yeah, if you have new work, new projects that if you either want advice about how to promote them, or you want us to share it on our social media, or work with, if you have a new paper coming out, you know, we can think about a press release potentially. So reach out whenever you want.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
Definitely.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, have a good holiday, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.